Today, we're diving into the story of Steelheart, a band that took the hard rock world by storm in the early 90s. However, they faced an uphill battle playing together for nearly a decade before anyone really took notice. They also faced tragedy and a changing musical industry. Today, because you guys requested it, let's explore the journey from Connecticut garages to international stardom for the band Steelheart. Today, I'm partnering with the #1 family history site called MyHeritage. Now that I've gotten older and have kids, I know they're going to ask me about my family history and our heritage, and it's really hard to answer a question when you don't have the complete answer. My parents are also getting older, so I want to learn as much as I can from my family and maybe even surprise my parents with some stuff they haven't heard or seen. Well, thankfully, this is where MyHeritage comes in. You simply build your family tree, adding your relatives and family. My dad told me for a long time that my grandfather owned the first Indian General Motors dealership for the state of Punjab in India. I had known my grandfather went to the States to train with General Motors for selling cars, but once I entered him into my family tree, I was able to pull up his documents in just seconds. MyHeritage had the shipping manifest of when he entered the port and had to go through US Customs in the 50s. And the document's still in really good condition. I even called up my dad and told him about the discovery and sent it to him. So I was able to pull up the shipping manifest, like with his name and the company that he works for. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, really?
MyHeritage uses the information you enter in your family tree to find matches in its collection of 20 billion documents. You may even find family members you didn't know you had. Simply by entering your family information, MyHeritage has a feature called Instant Discovery that can find you family members in addition to photos and documents that you can simply add to your family tree by the click of a button. Through Instant Discoveries, I learned that my great uncle on my father's side had actually come to the States years before my grandfather in 1947. MyHeritage had the shipping manifest of his boat, the SS Marine Falcon. It turned out he came to America to do his master's in engineering. My parents also had some old photos of my grandparents, so you can upload the photos, like these ones that are black and white, and MyHeritage can enhance them and recolor them. Start by building your family tree and researching them. You can sign up for a free 14-day trial at the link below. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. Hailing from Croatia, Steelheart frontman Miljenko Matijevic was born in 1964. His family moved to America, settling in Connecticut by 1970. 3 years later, at the age of 9, Miljenko, who sometimes goes by the name Michael in the press, joined the church choir and started doing covers by Johnny Cash and John Denver. By 11, he had his musical awakening finding Led Zeppelin. One of his first bands he played in was called Teaser, which did covers as well as wrote their own tunes. They did garner some interest from a producer named Morgan Walker, but that band soon fell by the wayside. By the age of 15, Miljenko joined a new band called The Mission. The Mission was led by Elliot Lewis, who later joined the group The Average White Band. By the age of 16, the seeds of Steelheart were finally planted when Miljenko formed the group Red Alert that also consisted of guitarist Chris Rusola, bassist James Ward, and drummer Jack Wilkinson. Red Alert did undergo a few lineup changes in the early days, with Wilkinson being replaced by John Fowler. They also added a fifth member in rhythm guitarist Frank DiCostanzo. Taking inspiration from, well, of course, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, AC/DC, and Van Halen, in addition to Bad Company, the band gigged around the Connecticut area starting around 1981, and they did this for nearly a decade before getting their big break. Despite playing in a band, Miljenko was also a really good student. In fact, he enrolled in engineering in college with the idea of someday becoming a mechanical engineer. But after his first year in school, he realized he truly wanted to be a musician first. Red Alert shopped around their demo tape to all the major record labels, and they were met with the same response. They received letters back saying that the labels couldn't accept unsolicited tapes unless it came from a manager or lawyer. There really wasn't much of a music scene in Connecticut during this period. In fact, Red Alert didn't play a ton of shows because there weren't a lot of places to play. One day, the band were talking to a drummer that they were considering using, and that drummer was from Los Angeles. The drummer told Miljenko to come out to California and he'd introduce him to some famous people in the industry. It was around this period Miljenko was having dinner with his parents, and his father asked him in a broken accent what his son was doing with his life. The frontman responded that he was going to Los Angeles because he was going to be a rock star someday, and his father told him to chase that dream. So when Miljenko went out to LA, he met that drummer who introduced him to a producer, and at that producer's house was a powerful manager named Stan Poses. That producer liked Red Alert's tape after listening to the song I'll Never Let You Go, and made some suggestions on how to improve the track. They were hanging out one day by the pool, and they saw that manager Stan Poses, who was wearing gold chains, and he was quite the character. The producer told Poses that he's got to listen to Red Alert's demo tape, but Poses told him that he was already managing too many bands and he couldn't take on any more projects. While they were in LA during this time, Red Alert also played some showcases for some other labels, but they were largely met with indifference. Eventually, Poses told the group to send him their demo tape to his office in New York.
And finally, I met our manager, Stan Poses, and he didn't want to listen to it. So he said to get rid of me, he just said, I'll tell you what, I'll write you down my number in my office in New York, give me a call, and I'll, see what I can do. Yeah, I'll see what I can do for you, Yeah, really. And it was like, I was just sitting there going, I'm going to shoot this guy, And finally, about 3 weeks later, I called the office up, and he just, I said, just give me the address to a secretary. And we sent the tape Federal Express, and he took it out. He says, what the hell, the kid went out through all this trouble, I'll bring it home. He brings it home, throws it on his bureau, on his desk, about 16,000 other tapes. So the Cinderella story of this whole thing is really weird, is that his 18-year-old son, Russell, comes out, he's going out to party one night, and he just grabs our tape, He comes home, and he goes, Dad, you gotta hear this band, it's great. Comes home drunk. He goes, you gotta hear this tape, these guys are great, He goes, where, what are you talking about? He goes, well, it's a tape you brought home. He goes, I'll listen to it in the morning. Sure enough, he listened to it in the morning, the whole band was in the office that afternoon. We had a mutual agreement, like, okay, we'll let you manage us and see what happens, type of thing. Well, the hell with that, man. Three days later, we were signing MCA Records. You were there. Yeah.
Upon signing with MCA, the group changed their name because a DJ in New York named Cool DJ Red Alert owned the trademark. Their label's vice president of A&R, a guy named Bruce Dickinson, broke the news to them. So the band, as well as their manager and someone from their label, headed to the gastropub Barney's Beanery, and they started throwing names around. Someone said the name Steel, while Miljenko said Heart, and thus the name Steelheart was born. The demos on that tape were pretty close to what ended up on Steelheart's self-titled album, but Miljenko explained that MCA sat on their debut album for months, not releasing it. You guys have to remember, it was late 1989, early 1990, and time was ticking for so-called hair bands. Even though Steelheart didn't consider themselves part of that movement, they considered their music closer to Aerosmith. Miljenko remarked to the Dig Me Up podcast that he thinks MCA was too busy with other projects and that Steelheart was a pretty low priority on their list. The song She's Gone ended up blowing up in Japan thanks to a well-renowned DJ named Masayoto, who premiered the song on his radio program and soon received 2,500 phone calls. Miljenko went to Japan by himself along with Steelheart's manager to promote the group's first album, and he's remarked in various interviews that they got so much attention. Upon arriving in the country, there were hundreds of people waiting for him at the airport. After the song blew up, the band returned to Japan and played several sold-out shows. This was what finally made MCA wake up to the band's album and finally release it. It came out in May of 1990 in America. The group's debut album reached number 40 on the Billboard 200 chart, propelled by the power ballad I'll Never Let You Go, which became a crossover hit, peaking at number 25 on the Hot 100 chart and 26 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. The song became a hit in America thanks to a disc jockey in Salt Lake City who played the song one time at midnight and the phone lines lit up. The band had a couple other singles that did reasonably well, including Everybody Loves Eileen, which charted at number 34 on the mainstream rock tracks chart, and She's Gone ended up peaking at number 59 on the Hot 100 chart in America. The album also showcased Miljenko's incredible vocal range, with the frontman telling the Daily Oklahoman that fans used to come up to him at the band's shows, telling him that he costed them money because they would place bets amongst themselves that the frontman couldn't hit the high notes every time. Steelheart's debut album ended up going gold. Steelheart returned in 1992 with Tangled in Rains, with Miljenko telling the Hartford Courant, "We got rid of some of the slick stuff. Instead of being polished, we made it as if you're in the room playing with us instead of a major production." But in just 2 years' time, the door for glam bands was long closed, and grunge and alternative rock groups were the new kids in town. Despite getting some positive reviews from the rock press, they didn't have a radio single with their second album, and the sales suffered as a result. The album peaked at number 144 on the Billboard album chart. Steelheart, however, did have quite a bit of success in Southeast Asia with the song Mama Don't You Cry. Miljenko told Metal Edge, "I feel if we came out when we should have come out, so like 87 or something like that, I think Steelheart would have been much more popular. When the grunge thing came in, it wasn't just the people that turned on the music, it was more the industry. I remember clearly the label was like, nope, we want nothing to do with that. It's like, really? Well, you made millions 10 minutes ago." While yes, grunge played an important part in ending so-called hair metal bands or glam metal groups, there's also another part of the story. So the LA Times ran a story in July of 1989, so this is about 2 years before Nirvana's Nevermind came out, with the headline that read, "GNR sound-alikes drain the scene along Sunset." Tracy Guns was quoted as saying nobody was really coming up with anything valuable at the end. In the book Nothing But a Good Time, A&R man Brett Harmon was quoted as saying, "By the end of the decade, every label had 5 to 20 hair metal bands. It was just overkill as far as what people could buy." He went on to add, "In 89 and 90, MCA hired 4 or 5 A&R guys and told us each to sign 3 bands. So there's like 15 bands we're putting out in a year and a half, and that's every label." He went on to add that bands like Steelheart, who were newer, combined with the label's older roster of artists, just oversaturated the entire market. 1992 also proved to be a pretty devastating year for Steelheart. On Halloween of that year, Steelheart was on tour opening for Slaughter in Denver. It was actually a last-minute show that was added to their itinerary. Miljenko remarked, "We're on the 49th show and my manager comes over and says, 'Hey, there's a show on Halloween night. Let's do 50 shows and we'll call it a day. We'll rest and then we'll go back out again.'" I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. As the band was on their tour bus heading to the gig in Denver, Miljenko looked around him and saw everyone was either wasted or they were under the influence of drugs. And he kind of thought to himself, is this it? He felt like he had to do something crazy that night. So during Steelheart's performance of their song Dancing in the Fire, he climbed an unsecured lighting truss. That 1,000-pound structure fell, striking Miljenko on the back of his head, cracking it open and leaving him with a traumatic brain injury in addition to a twisted spine, a broken jaw, as well as cheekbone and nose. He was lucky to have been alive, and he even walked off stage by himself. He faced a very long road to recovery though. He spent nearly 7 months in bed. He went to many neurosurgeons and a lot of them had no answer for him. It wasn't until he met a neuropsychologist back home in Connecticut that it finally helped him in his recovery. Miljenko remarked to Cryptic Rock that had the accident not have happened, he could have seen a few things happening to Steelheart. He remarked, "Not having that accident probably would have led us to one of two things. We could have focused on Asia more until we fell back into the United States, or I would have gone solo." As for the liability of the whole accident, he admitted to Metal Edge that his lawyer screwed something up and the case was thrown out of court. In the end, he sadly got nothing. Then one by one, the people in his life also started to leave. The label dropped Steelheart, his bandmates didn't even bother checking in on him, and his manager and wife also left. In 1996, Miljenko returned with Steelheart, albeit with a new lineup. They released their third record, Wait, which didn't really connect with audiences commercially in the States, but they did have success in Southeast Asia. On that album was the song We All Die Young, which ended up being later used in the 2001 film Rockstar, which starred Mark Wahlberg and Jennifer Aniston. Miljenko ended up even providing the singing voice for Mark Wahlberg's character. We Die Young actually dates back to 1992 and was written by the frontman when he was early on in his recovery from that horrific stage accident. However, Miljenko ran into some issues with the song. Rockstar premiered on September 4th, 2001. The idea was that the song We All Die Young was going to go to radio to heavily promote the movie, and there was going to be a lot of money behind it. But then the events of 9/11 happened, and you might remember the infamous Clear Channel memo that listed songs with questionable or insensitive lyrics in the wake of the tragedy. Miljenko told Metal Edge, "We All Die Young was done and it was over. It was finished." It was like, whoa. It didn't feel like it got its chance in the sun. I really think the song deserves another push. The movie also proved to be a box office bomb as well. It was in the 2000s Miljenko did some work in South Korea on television, and the song She's Gone from Steelheart's first album is still one of the most popular karaoke songs in the country. Following his work on the movie Rockstar, Miljenko turned his attention to electronic dance music, shopping around an EDM demo he did back in 1999 to different producers around Europe. But he was unable to click with anyone, and he soon learned that DJs, not the person singing on the tracks, were the real star. He soon found himself resettling in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he built a studio and recorded Steelheart's follow-up record, 2008's Good to Be Alive. It was sometime in 2004 to 2006 that Miljenko had some discussions about joining Van Halen. He hung out a lot with Eddie and had some good conversations, but then David Lee Roth rejoined the group, and they famously went on that reunion tour in 2007. During the same decade, Miljenko revealed that he also auditioned for Velvet Revolver before Scott Weiland came in, and he even auditioned with Stone Temple Pilots following Scott Weiland's departure. He ended up taking a meeting with a manager in LA around 2009 or 2010, who told him that he represented a band that had sold a whopping 80 million records. Miljenko, before he knew it, was playing 2 tours in 2010 with Ray Manzurek and Robbie Krieger, and even recorded some music with them. Steelheart released their latest record, Through Worlds of Stardust, in 2017, and a live album, Rockin' Milan, in 2018. To celebrate the band's 30th anniversary, albeit a few years late, the band has put out an album called Steelheart 30, which is a culmination of brand new recordings and newly remixed and remastered tracks. That does it for today's video, guys. I once again want to thank MyHeritage for partnering with me in today's video. Start building your family tree and researching your family today. Check out the link down below for a 14-day free trial.